Just by way of introduction, my name is Craig, and I lead our go-to-market strategy here in North America. And my teammate with me is Harry. Harry, you want to
Hi,
introduce
Harry Thomas. I am the OT security advisor here at Otorio, particularly one of the subject matter experts here working throughout the utilities industry and oil and gas industry. I have a years of experience in OT cybersecurity, and this is a pleasure to be here, Craig.
Yeah, Harry, it's good to have this conversation with you. I'm excited about it. So you ready to jump into this? I got a few questions for you.
You got a few questions. I got a few notes too. So let's get
All right,
get
let's
through
do this. So, Harry, let's start with the obvious, right? What are some of the challenges you're seeing in the utility space, specific to those that generate and transmit electricity?
It's a good question. The electric utility space has quite a few different challenges that they face, particularly surrounding resources and budget. The smaller utilities, your cooperatives, tend to have some conflicting priority issues between trying to or working through achieving compliance with NERC CIP. I think we're all familiar with NERC CIP, and balancing their kind of priorities with the cybersecurity projects, right? I mean, we have the White House and other types of bodies, regulatory bodies, informing the community of what we need to work on, but sometimes it doesn't go hand in hand of what needs to be done via compliance.
Yeah, so let's talk about compliance and these regulations coming at the industry. Are they clear? And if they're clear, are they going to address the real challenge?
I think they're clear. If you read the White House directives for securing critical infrastructure, it outlines a lot of really good initiatives as far as being able to know what's within your network or understand kind of how you're going to identify or protect what's going on to keep process and operations running. I think what the issue is the fact that we're still trying to achieve our compliance, which is generally basic cybersecurity hygiene. But when the requirements are coming out stating that you need to go above and beyond a majority of these requirements, you're kind of fighting the battle of the chicken and the egg, where compliance is saying, hey, this is where you need to be, and you achieve that, and you know how long it's going to take or how much budget it's going to take to be able to achieve that compliance requirement. But what's happening is you have additional individuals, organizations requesting you to go a little bit above and beyond, which is hard because your maybe cybersecurity roadmap, your strategy does not really include all of this. So you have to go back to the drawing board. So think about being told, like, take this for example, you're writing a paper in school, and you bring it to your teacher and you're like, hey, I need you to review this. And the teacher's like, this is really good, but everything after this paragraph doesn't really meet the prompt. So I need you to go back and rewrite that. Well, the issue is you have in your head what you wrote past that paragraph, those paragraphs, and you want to reuse what you have already in your head. But you're not really able to achieve that because that's not really meeting the requirement of the prompt. That's kind of what's happening right now. We have this prompt and we have what we understand as the cybersecurity baseline right now. And we have to go and rethink about how we're going to achieve this and then push forward. But it takes some time to be able to outline the projects or the technologies necessary in order to help achieve what these other regulatory bodies or directives are saying.
Okay, so we're talking about the challenge, one of the challenges being regulatory, right? What are some of the other challenges that utilities are facing? Maybe some internal challenges?
Yeah, I would say internal challenges. So remember back when I was saying they're having an issue between achieving compliance and prioritizing cybersecurity projects. Well, you also have your internal kind of push and pull, right? You might have a board of directors, or you might have executives that are hearing something different in the industry. And generally, you're not familiar. You might not be familiar with what the strategy is, but then you're trying to balance what your executives are saying, what the board is saying, versus what you're hearing from the regulatory bodies, and then really trying to understand what needs to come first in order to achieve what you need to achieve.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's pretend I work for, the local co-op here in Middle Tennessee, and I have to. I'm that person, right, that has to secure the business, but then I need to report to others as well. What's some advice that you would give me as that person that's in the middle, if you will?
That's a hard one. I think where I'd start is a baseline. So we know, hopefully all of us cooperative operators, we're achieving our basic NERC SIP. I would probably progress past that and understand a baseline of where you want to be, and then figure out what that delta is, and then work backwards, right? Try to figure out what steps need to be implemented or what strategies need to be developed in order to achieve these milestones. It's hard to create a cybersecurity program strategy without knowing what the end is in mind. So if you're working backwards from what your goal is, you'll be better off.
Okay, so do we start with the goal and build towards that, or do we just start with something, right? We throw something, and by something, is it a technology or is it a policy, right, at that baseline, right? So what do we throw first at the baseline, or do we define a strategy first? And if we define strategy first, how do I do that? What tools do I use? What programs do I use to define that strategy? So I guess my question is coming at you from two different angles: top down, bottom up.
Yeah. So the top down approach, defining your strategy first and then progressing from that, or working backwards from that, is probably your best option if you have the time. So we're talking about, so you're giving me these two questions, and what isn't really factored in there is the trade-off of time. So you can either spend money and solve a problem that way, right? Either buying a solution or having consultants come in and help work on a lot of these projects to help achieve whatever you think your goal is. Or you can think inversely, figure out your goal. Either it can be as simple as, within the NIST cybersecurity framework, we have our detect, protect, all that. Let's pick one and accelerate that a little bit, and then progress to the next year where we pick another category. Same thing, you can even do that with NERC SIP. Or I like taking a combination of frameworks. Not all frameworks, not every single framework out there can really help you put the frame of mind necessary in order to increase your baseline. So I like taking bits and pieces from NERC SIP, 62443, CMMC, and putting it together, figuring out what works for you, because cybersecurity isn't necessarily a one size fits all, because we have complex networks, we have organizations, asset owners have maybe bought and acquired other assets. So you have this kind of security drift, where you have a lot of security vendors in there, and you're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work. So if you start with an end goal in mind and figure out your KPIs around that, then you can probably start measuring your success to getting to that goal.
Yeah, more of a statement for me than a question for you, but having been in, cybersecurity now for, 12, 15 years myself, it seems like usually just starting, documenting what you're doing and moving forward in some capacity is an appropriate strategy. Because
I think it's, let me interrupt real quick.
Yeah, please.
I think it is an appropriate strategy, but we're beyond that right now. We have
Okay.
cooperatives, we have other utilities that are documenting, right? In order to achieve certain portions of NERC SIP, right, you have to document and comment the reason why you have firewall rules, or you have to have some form of asset inventory where they're probably utilizing an Excel spreadsheet in order to get the job done. But you need to automate some of this. You're wasting,
Okay.
you could be wasting a lot of hours trying to achieve compliance, but doing it in a way that you're costing the business some prioritization risks to be able to achieve that next level of your baseline or that cybersecurity strategy goal that you're looking for. So I would suggest figuring out additionally what you're doing that's maybe manual and figure out a way to automate that, whether it's internally having a project or going out and getting a solution to help out.
So would that be an IDS?
It could be an intrusion detection system. Some organizations have trouble with their data being everywhere, information being everywhere, and not having a single point where they can point at and say, hey, this is our source of truth. That's what the Excel spreadsheets are, or your notepad.txt type document is that for them, for a while, that's been the single source of truth. So really trying to figure out how to transfer that to a solution is, I would highly suggest researching and trying to find what that solution is, or the cost benefit analysis of that solution.
So we're talking about GRC, right? We're talking about being able to define our strategy around how we're going to manage our governance, risk and compliance. So you're suggesting that the opportunity is out there for those in this space to automate that rather than check boxes in an Excel or spreadsheet or Google Sheet.
I think it's beyond just GRC. So when we talk to organizations, or I have friends out there in the industry, we talk about compliance and cybersecurity, and generally they're like two different departments, meaning they're operating in silos. But to be honest, like they're part of a bigger portion of the organization. They're better combined than they are individually, because you're not going to have somebody in compliance go out and query a, I don't know, substation for assets, or walk down to a substation. Maybe, I mean, possibly, right? I mean, they could just get in a car and go out and drive to a substation and be like, all right, these are our assets and matches up with my Excel document. But generally they're tapping on the shoulders of the OT cybersecurity professionals, analysts, engineers on the other side of the house to help them achieve what they need to achieve. So I like thinking about, let me rephrase it a little bit differently. So you have an onion, right? We're all complex. We're like analogies over with other analogies. And I just watched Shrek this past weekend. So now
the kids like it.
Yeah, my kids love it. But now I'm thinking about the onion metaphor that Shrek talks about. So in the middle of that onion, right, or your defense in depth, you have your OT cybersecurity engineers and analysts. They're there, they're the front lines, right? You have your incident response. They're the ones trying to make sure that the network stays up, that everything is secure, and that processes can continue to operate efficiently. After that is you have your GRC. You have your compliance, right? That's the next layer of this onion, where they help you establish your cybersecurity baseline, or they help you establish hygiene, where they're the ones coming from that top-down approach, where they're saying, this is probably where you should be, or this is where we want you to be. and you're trying to come at it from both ways.
Okay, Harry. Good conversation so far. Let me shift gears slightly. What are some of the trends that you and we in the industry are seeing out there in the marketplace? What are some of the trends we're seeing?
Yeah, so let's talk about the problems. I know that there are individuals out there, organizations out there that are saying we're not seeing those state level sponsored threats as much as we think we should be seeing them. To be honest, I think the threats that we should be focusing on right now is the ransomware. Most recently, there have been attempts to utilize ransomware, I think, in my opinion, to mask some other nefarious activities. So one, ransomware is it's just more sophisticated. It used to be a crime of opportunity. They used people creating ransomware used to wait until like Eternal Blue came out to build WannaCry and not Petya, right? It's just things like that that aren't there anymore. So what's happening is these organizations are now turning into a company. I mean, ransomware is a billion-dollar business. They're not utilizing the same spray and pray technologies or ideologies anymore. They're a little bit more sophisticated as far as being able to infiltrate a network. They're not waiting for these brand new public zero-day exploits. They're handing it off to a specialized group that might work on infiltrating the network, and then handing off that access to another group that is responsible for detonating the ransomware. And then that might get handed off to another group that's responsible for exfiltration, right? So you're now thinking about a team against a team rather than some random guy in, the globe that decided to weaponize WannaCry.
Are you saying we need to watch out for Mr. Robot in real life?
I don't think Mr. Robot. I'm thinking we need to stop believing that ransomware is not going to happen to us. We have this mentality right now that it's like that can happen to my neighbor, but that's not going to happen to me. And I'm starting to think that we need to shift our focus on, it's not if we're breached, it's not if we get hit with ransomware, it's when we get hit with ransomware. And let's try to build our defenses in a meaningful way where we can limit the impact.
If I have limited budget, Craig, I'm going to spend it on securing my IT assets and my OT assets. How is that a valid challenge of what we do in OT security or not?
You're between a rock and a hard place, right? You have these very tough decisions to make. If I take budget away from X to give to Y, what happens to X? And in the perfect world, the IT side of the house would be your boundary to the internet from the OT side. But unfortunately, that's just not the case. We have vendors that think about the GE data highway. We have vendors that have access into our OT network. So if you're thinking about it that way, and that there's other ways to get inside your industrial network, your ICS OT network, then maybe focusing on the perimeter is not the best option. Maybe instead, let's focus on some choke points within your OT network, maybe your DMZ, let's bolster that, or have some sort of remote access. I think intrusion detection systems are a great way to start, or network security monitoring, whatever flavor and acronym you want to use. But I think that's a good start, right? You're identifying the threats as they're happening in real time. You might be able to possibly identify anomalies as far as maybe there's a broadcast storm on your network that's really limiting your bandwidth and your throughput. But I think there's more. It's time to shift it a little bit more to the protect side. What can we create to protect our servers, right? Where we might have some sort of agent on a server, or Let's think about network segmentation. Let's push beyond just really identifying the symptom, right? Let's not treat the symptom. Let's find the root cause and try to slow down some of these threats before they can really impact the industrial network.
Yeah, I'm glad you referenced protect there, because I was going to challenge you about detect, right? If all we ever talk about in this industry is detect, we're going to lose every time. We're going to lose every time to the hacktivists or the nation states or Mr. Robot or anybody that wants to try to make a point about getting into our network, into our platform.
I think detect holds an important portion of your cybersecurity program. It's required. It absolutely is. You need to be able to find bad things, doing bad stuff in your network as they're doing it or just before they're doing it. You touched upon protect. I think protect is really good. Sometimes in industrial cybersecurity, we're limited on the type of protect that we can have as far as an actual intrusion prevention system, cutting off access, which is okay, right? We just need to be able to work around the confines of what we're given, right? We know that the availability of the industrial network is paramount. So let's figure out a way to create the protect category or extend the protect category to include other options that we're not thinking. So think about the MITRE attack framework. Some people have thoughts about that, whether positive or negative, but there, over the past couple of years, right, we have now the ICS MITRE attack framework, where we recognize that the same capabilities that can be used within IT generally aren't as applicable in the OT world, and that your impact is completely different, right? You know, you're talking about loss of safety, loss of view, loss of control, not have that same type of impact on the IT side. So when you start taking into account that we're protecting the industrial network or identifying issues within the industrial network so that we don't have a loss of view or a loss of life, loss of safety, then I think we're branching or moving towards the right direction. We're all starting to march to the right direction. And you mentioned, so we were talking about protect right now, but I think recover is also a good aspect that companies need to think a little bit more about, right? So we have detection, mean time to detection. We also have mean time to response, mean time to recovery. We have to factor those other aspects of that NIST framework into how we think about our cybersecurity strategy.
The one thing that has surprised me now that I'm spending more time in OT cybersecurity than IT cybersecurity is, now this is just, Craig speaking. I'm not speaking as an industry expert here. I'm speaking as a guy that's been through hundreds of conversations in this space. But what still surprises me all these years later is the level of concern for, okay, somebody got into my IT systems and is threatening to take client or customer information, right? That's bad. And that seems to have a higher degree still to this day of concern than, but if they get into my electrical generation or transmission system and take it offline, I now am not delivering power, and it's 95 degrees out today, and there are people counting on electricity to keep their air conditioning running, or the inverse, right? It's 0 degrees and I can't run my heat pump because I don't have electricity.
Yeah.
Both, we need to be concerned about both, but I'm still surprised at how the OT, side of this equation, right? I can't generate or I can't transmit electricity for the next few hours or for a couple of days because of an OT attack. It still surprises me how little attention people give that.
Yeah,
I would Colonial Pipeline. Do you think Colonial Pipeline, those of us that aren't in the industry, do you think they knew about it? Do you think they were concerned about it?
I would, so to take a step back on what you were talking about, like that IT OT concern about data loss or loss of functionality that one side might face versus the other. I think that's really kind of benchmarked around the type of compliance and the type of reporting that comes out that's required on PII, PHI, right?
Okay.
So we all think about PII or PHI, personal identifiable information, as something that is key to protecting, and it is, right? It is key to protecting, right? Your employee information, your customer information, financials, intellectual property, all things that are required to be protected. And thankfully, there are compliance requirements, regulatory bodies that require these companies to actually have in place some sort of data loss protection. What we're seeing, in my opinion, is in OT cybersecurity, we're not at that level yet, right? We've had IT forever. IT has been in the forever. I mean, I'm not going to say my age, but IT has been out long enough that to digitize everything. And over, I don't know, the past 10, 15 years, we're starting to progress more and more digitized OT systems. And because of that, unfortunately, we're kind of behind, right? This is, although we're all one organization, the OT cybersecurity regulatory bodies, compliance bodies are still kind of behind the 8 ball, and we're progressing slowly that way. We're doing what we need to do with new things like directives coming out, or changes to like NERC-CIP now giving some sort of guidance around utilizing cloud technologies. I mean, that's great. That's awesome. But if we keep comparing, IT to OT, I think you're always going to be like, well, I can't keep up with the Joneses. And that's not the case. It goes back to what I was talking about in protect, that category, right? Let's figure out a way to still have protect, but protecting the industrial environment in a way that's conducive to operations, not protect from the IT side of the house, their idea of what protect is, which is stopping communication or rerouting network traffic. I think there's other ways that we can go about it that's more beneficial to the OT industry than just saying, that's what, James Smith did over there, we're going to do that over here too.
Yeah. Well, no, don't get me wrong. I want my PII to be protected, but I want to make sure the AC is still running here.
I think there's a lot of people out there that take things like electricity and running water for granted, and it's good to bring light to it. You almost feel validated when you start seeing directives coming from like the White House saying that things need to be done in critical infrastructure in order to ensure that we have the running water, we have electricity flowing, we're able to keep the AC on, or have the tools and technologies available to protect lives in hospitals. But we just need to be a little bit more patient while still pushing the envelope within our own organization. We can't rely on just the directives or just the compliance and regulatory bodies to say what we need to do. Let's figure out how we should get there or what we want to do, and then start moving that way.
Yeah. Well, Harry, it's been a fun and enlightening conversation. I always enjoy our chats, whether it's structured like this or whether it's, a quick little Slack message back and forth. So Thank you for taking time to do this with me. Any final thoughts?
I think of this quote: just because you spent a long time making the decision doesn't mean you need to keep with it, with the mistakes and so on and so forth. So let's figure out what needs to be done and then just go and do it. Because if it doesn't work, thankfully, we can probably try again.
So if you're going to throw out a quote, I'm going to throw a quote out back
Oh
at you.
man.
One of my
All right.
favorites, right? From
What's your
General
quote?
George Patton, right? A good plan violently executed today is better than a perfect plan executed sometime in the future.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. I
yeah.
like the ability to just start executing. I mean, obviously, we need to have a base level of understanding. We have to all be on the same page somehow, some way, but we all still need to be able to march to the same goal
Yeah.
and know that that direction is where we're supposed to be. You know what, Craig? You've been asking me a lot of questions today. I want to hear your final thoughts.
Oh boy. Okay. You know what? The word conversation pops into my mind. I think it's critically important that we in the industry, that we with, the marketplace have conversations, right? I think we all can learn a lot from one another. And I think it's those conversations that will help continue to move us all forward, whether we're, a utility that generates or transmits power, or whether it's an organization like us that is in the OT cybersecurity space. I think conversations bring a lot of value to everybody and drives better. It just drives a better understanding of what is possible, a better understanding of what can and should be done to ensure we're all safer.
I think final thoughts are we have visibility. We're thinking about visibility. Let's start looking around the corner and figuring out what that next step is. The more thought that we can put to it right now to figure out what our next 2, 3, 5 steps are, the better off we're going to be once we're able to achieve the visibility within our industrial networks. And I think that's probably the best kind of remark I got.
Actually, before we go, do you think we need more regulation? Or do you think the regulation we have is enough? We just need more time in the marketplace, more time in the industry to meet the requirements that are out there?
I think we don't need more regulation. I think we need more guidance, and that's what's starting to come out. We're having the guidance, but the guidance has been trying to catch up to where we are now. Now let's start thinking forward thinking, right? It's leaning into the future, figuring out now we're thinking about cloud technologies for OT. Let's start moving beyond that and going, what's around the corner that they're implementing in the IT side that we can implement in the OT side with a little bit of an OT flair in order to achieve what we need to achieve. So I'm very happy with what regulatory bodies and directives, those types of communications that are coming out to the market or coming out to industry that is giving that guidance. It's on us now to really have the conversations and then have the decisions, the necessary decisions in order to push forward.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Harry, for spending time with me here, having this chat.
No worries, dude. I really appreciate it.
All right. We'll talk soon.
All right. Cheers, bud.